Albert Camus believed justice was one of the most dangerous words in human history, not because justice is unimportant, but because it is so easily turned into a weapon. In the name of justice, societies have waged wars, executed citizens, destroyed communities, and justified cruelty. Camus wanted to understand how something meant to protect human dignity could so often become the excuse for violating it. For Camus, justice could never be separated from the reality of human limitation. Human beings do not possess perfect knowledge, perfect objectivity, or perfect morality. Every legal system is built on interpretation, memory, power, and error. When a society forgets this and begins to believe its judgments are absolute, justice becomes tyranny. Camus had lived through the consequences of this kind of certainty. He saw ideologies that claimed to know what history demanded and who deserved to live or die. Fascism, Stalinism, and colonialism all justified themselves in the name of justice. Each claimed to be correcting a wrong. Each left behind mass graves. This taught Camus something essential. When justice is detached from humility, it becomes a justification for violence. He believed that justice must always be restrained by compassion, not sentimentality, but an awareness that every human being is more than their actions, more than their crimes, and more than the judgments placed upon them. Without that awareness, law becomes nothing more than organized cruelty. Camus also rejected the idea that justice should aim to create a perfect world. Every attempt to impose perfection on human life has ended in catastrophe. The desire to eliminate all injustice leads to the elimination of people who are declared unjust. The dream of total justice produces total violence. Instead, Camus believed justice should aim to limit suffering, not eliminate imperfection. It should protect life, not purify society. It should be modest, not absolute. A just society, for Camus, is not one that claims to be morally pure. It is one that knows it is not. Justice must always remember its own fallibility. The moment it forgets that, it becomes something else, something deadly. Camus believed that the greatest danger to justice is the belief that it must be complete. When people begin to think that justice must settle every wrong, balance every suffering, and punish every sin, they create a standard no human society can meet. And when that standard cannot be met, violence enters to try to force it. This is why Camus was deeply suspicious of revolutionary justice. He saw how movements that began with genuine moral outrage gradually turned ruthless. They started by wanting fairness. They ended by justifying terror. The language of justice gave them permission to kill. For Camus, justice that demands total victory is no longer justice. It becomes domination. True justice, he believed, must accept that some wrongs cannot be fully repaired, some losses cannot be balanced, some suffering will remain. To refuse to accept this is to become cruel in the attempt to correct it. Camus also believed that justice must always be paired with limits. Without limits, law turns into vengeance. When societies claim they must punish without restraint, they inevitably cross into brutality. He had seen this in wartime trials, political purges, and public executions. All were carried out in the name of justice. All destroyed human lives. The justification was always the same: these people deserve it. Camus rejected this logic. No one deserves to be reduced to nothing. Justice for Camus must always stop short of annihilation. It may restrain, imprison, or isolate, but it must not erase. Erasure belongs to vengeance, not justice. This is why Camus believed that even the worst criminals must be treated as human beings, not because they are innocent, but because if justice abandons humanity, it abandons itself. Justice that forgets compassion becomes tyranny in disguise. Camus also believed that justice must never pretend to stand outside history. Laws are written by people in particular places at particular times with particular interests. What a society calls just often reflects its fears, its prejudices, and its power structures as much as its moral ideals. This is why Camus was skeptical of legal systems that claimed to be neutral. He had seen how colonial law in Algeria treated some lives as less valuable than others. He saw how political trials were used to silence opponents. Justice was often less about truth and more about control. For Camus, this meant that justice must always be self-critical. A legal system that cannot question itself is already unjust. When laws are treated as sacred, they become tools of oppression. Camus believed that the first duty of justice is not punishment, but honesty. A just society must be able to admit when it is wrong. It must be willing to revise its laws, release prisoners, and correct past mistakes. Justice that cannot change is not justice. It is dogma. This humility was central to Camus' philosophy. Human beings are not gods. They do not see the whole picture. They make decisions with limited information. Justice must therefore be cautious. This is why Camus opposed irreversible punishments. Once something cannot be undone, the system can no longer admit error. It is forced to pretend it was always right. That is not justice. That is pride. For Camus, justice must remain open to doubt. It must live with uncertainty. That is the price of treating human beings as more than objects to be managed. Camus believed that justice must always be grounded in lived human experience, not abstract ideals. He distrusted systems that spoke in the language of pure theory, statistics, or historical destiny. When people become numbers, justice becomes easier to betray. This is why Camus was so deeply concerned with individual suffering. A law may look fair on paper, but if it crushes people in practice, it has failed. Justice is not measured by how coherent a system is, but by how it treats those who stand before it. Camus believed that every person, even a criminal, retains a basic human dignity that no court can take away. Punishment should protect society, but it should never deny this dignity. When punishment humiliates, degrades, or annihilates, it becomes injustice. He saw this in prisons designed to break people rather than restrain them. He saw it in trials that turned defendants into symbols rather than human beings. Justice that treats people as examples rather than persons has already become cruel. Camus also rejected the idea that justice must be dramatic. Spectacle is the enemy of fairness. Public executions, show trials, and harsh sentences meant to send a message are not about justice. They are about intimidation. True justice, Camus believed, should be quiet, careful, and restrained. It should not seek to impress. It should seek to protect. This is why he believed mercy is not the opposite of justice, but its companion. Mercy does not mean ignoring harm. It means refusing to reduce a human being to that harm. A justice system without mercy is not strong, it is afraid. Camus believed that one of the greatest temptations of justice is to become moral certainty. When a society convinces itself that it knows exactly who is right and who is wrong, it becomes blind to its own cruelty. Certainty creates confidence, and confidence makes violence feel justified. This is why Camus feared ideologies that claimed to possess the truth of history. Whether they came from the right or the left, these movements believed that their goals were so righteous that any means were permitted. People could be imprisoned, exiled, or killed in the name of a better future. Camus rejected this entirely. No future, he believed, is worth the destruction of human dignity in the present. Justice cannot be postponed. It must exist here and now. He also believed that justice must never be separated from limits. A society that refuses to set boundaries on its own power will always abuse it. Even good intentions become dangerous when they are unlimited. For Camus, justice meant saying no, not only to crime, but to the desire to control everything. It meant accepting that some injustice will always remain, and that trying to eliminate it completely will only produce greater injustice. This is why he saw moderation as a moral virtue. not weakness but restraint, the refusal to go too far. Justice that knows when to stop is justice that protects life. Justice that does not know when to stop becomes terror. Camus believed that justice must never forget the human cost of punishment. Every sentence affects more than the person who committed the crime. Families are broken, children grow up without parents, communities are wounded. When justice ignores these ripples of suffering, it becomes blind. This is why Camus opposed punishments that destroy entire lives. He believed society has the right to protect itself, but not the right to ruin people completely. A justice system that leaves nothing but wreckage behind is not maintaining order, it is spreading harm. He saw this especially in political justice, where entire groups could be punished for the actions of a few. Collective punishment, he believed, is one of the greatest betrayals of justice. Guilt is individual. Suffering should never be shared by those who did nothing wrong. Camus also believed that punishment should always leave room for return. A person who has paid their debt should be able to rejoin society. A justice system that offers no path back creates permanent outcasts. Permanent exclusion breeds resentment, despair, and more violence. Justice that creates enemies is not justice at all. For Camus, the goal of punishment should be to limit harm, not to produce it. It should protect society while preserving the humanity of those it restrains. Justice that destroys hope is not justice, it is slow revenge. Camus believed that justice must always be rooted in solidarity rather than domination. He rejected the idea that society should stand above individuals as a punishing force. Instead, he believed that justice should express a shared commitment to protecting one another from harm. This is why he opposed systems that treated criminals as enemies. When the law turns people into enemies, it invites war. And war, even when waged in the name of justice, always destroys more than it protects. Camus believed that a just society does not seek to crush those who fall outside its rules. It seeks to contain harm while preserving the bond between human beings. Even when someone has done wrong, they are still part of the human community. This idea was central to his philosophy of rebellion. True rebellion, Camus argued, does not aim to dominate or annihilate. It aims to set limits. It says, this far and no further. Justice works in the same way. It must draw boundaries around violence without becoming violent itself. When law becomes aggressive, when it seeks to humiliate or destroy, it stops being law and becomes power. Camus believed that power is always tempted to disguise itself as justice. But the two are not the same. Justice is measured by how it treats the weakest. Power is measured by how much it can impose. A society that confuses these two will always slide toward oppression. For Camus, the true mark of justice was not how harshly it punished, but how carefully it restrained itself. Camus believed that justice must be something lived, not merely administered. It is not a set of rules applied from above, but a relationship between human beings who recognize one another's vulnerability. When law forgets this, it becomes mechanical and cruel. He was especially wary of justice that operates at a distance. When judges, politicians, or citizens no longer have to face the people affected by their decisions, it becomes easy to impose suffering without feeling responsible for it. Prisons fill, lives disappear behind walls. The pain remains out of sight. Camus believed that justice must always remain close to the human cost it creates. If a punishment feels unbearable to imagine, it should not be imposed. Law must never allow itself to forget that it deals in human lives, not abstract cases. This is why Camus opposed punishments that rely on humiliation. Degrading a person does not make society safer. It only deepens the wounds that produced violence in the first place. A justice system that humiliates teaches people that dignity is something granted by power rather than something inherent in being human. Camus believed this was a moral catastrophe. Dignity must be unconditional. Once it is made conditional, anyone can lose it. Justice should affirm dignity even when it restrains freedom. It should say, you are accountable for what you have done, but you are still a person. You are not garbage to be discarded. Camus knew this was difficult. Anger demands punishment. Fear demands severity. But justice must not be ruled by either. It must be guided by a deeper commitment to human worth. A society that forgets this may still have laws, courts, and prisons, but it no longer has justice. Camus also believed that justice must be able to forgive, not in the sense of forgetting harm, but in the sense of allowing people to move beyond it. A society that refuses forgiveness traps itself in an endless cycle of punishment. Every crime demands retaliation. Every retaliation creates new grievances. This cycle never ends. Forgiveness for Camus was not weakness. It was a refusal to let the past control the future. It was the recognition that human beings are more than their worst moments. Justice that cannot forgive becomes obsessed with retribution. It turns backward instead of forward. It fixes people forever in what they once were. Camus believed this was deeply inhuman. Life is movement. Identity is change. To deny that is to deny what it means to be alive. A justice system that allows no redemption produces only despair. Despair breeds more violence. People who believe they have no future have nothing left to lose. This is why Camus believed punishment must leave room for return. A person must be able to imagine a life after punishment. Without that possibility, justice becomes a form of social death. Camus was not naive. He knew that some crimes leave wounds that never fully heal. But he believed that the refusal to forgive only deepens those wounds. It keeps society locked in its own trauma. Justice, he believed, should aim to restore where possible, not merely to punish. Even when full restoration is impossible, the attempt matters. A society that can forgive is not forgetting. It is choosing not to be ruled by hatred. Camus believed that justice must always resist becoming an instrument of fear. When societies are afraid of crime, of disorder, of outsiders, they are tempted to make their laws harsher, their punishments more severe, and their definitions of guilt broader. Fear demands simple answers. It wants someone to blame. But Camus believed fear is one of the most dangerous foundations for justice. A fearful society is willing to sacrifice fairness for security. It becomes more concerned with appearing strong than with being just. Laws begin to target groups instead of individuals. Punishments become symbolic displays of power rather than careful responses to wrongdoing. Camus had seen this in wartime and in political repression. Fear allowed governments to imprison, exile, and kill while claiming they were protecting the public. Justice became a performance designed to reassure the majority, even if it destroyed the innocent. True justice, Camus believed, must be brave enough to resist fear. It must protect society without surrendering to panic. It must be willing to accept risk in order to preserve dignity. No society can be perfectly safe, but a society that abandons justice for the illusion of safety becomes something far worse than unsafe. It becomes cruel. Camus also believed that fear distorts judgment. When people are afraid, they see threats everywhere. They stop listening. They stop questioning. Justice turns into suspicion. A just society must be willing to tolerate uncertainty. It must accept that not every danger can be eliminated without destroying something more precious in the process. For Camus, justice was not about eliminating fear. It was about refusing to let fear decide who deserves to be treated as human. Camus believed that justice must always remain grounded in the recognition of shared human fragility. No one is born immune to failure. No one lives without making mistakes. Even the worst crimes are committed by people who were once children, who were once vulnerable, who were once shaped by forces beyond their control. This does not excuse wrongdoing, but it does change how justice should respond to it. A justice system that forgets this becomes cruel. Camus rejected the idea that some people belong to a different moral species. Criminals are not monsters. They are human beings who have committed monstrous acts. To treat them as something less than human is to deny the truth of what they are and what we are. Justice, for Camus, must always remember that it judges from within humanity, not above it. Judges, jurors, and lawmakers are not morally superior beings. They are ordinary people placed in positions of power. When they forget this, they begin to mistake authority for virtue. This is why Camus believed humility was essential to justice. The law must know that it can be wrong. It must know that it may one day be judged by history. A justice system that believes it is infallible becomes ruthless. Camus also believed that justice should never pretend to be morally pure. Every act of punishment carries a moral cost. Every prison sentence, every fine, every act of force creates suffering. Justice must acknowledge this rather than hide behind procedure. To punish is to harm, even when that harm is necessary. A just society does not pretend otherwise. It recognizes the tragedy in every act of coercion. This tragic awareness, Camus believed, is what keeps justice from turning into cruelty. When a society knows that even necessary punishment is painful, it remains cautious, it hesitates, it limits itself. Justice that does not hesitate is not justice. It is power wearing a robe. For Camus, justice was ultimately a form of rebellion against the cruelty of the world. In a universe that offers no guaranteed meaning or fairness, human beings must create their own moral order. But that order must be built on restraint, not domination. Justice, in Camus' view, is the refusal to allow suffering to justify more suffering. It is the decision to draw limits around violence rather than unleash it. In a world filled with injustice, justice does not promise perfection. It promises that we will not become monsters in the name of correcting monsters. Camus believed that this refusal is what makes justice meaningful. When a society chooses to protect human dignity, even when it is difficult, it affirms that life is worth more than vengeance. It says that even those who fall deserve to be treated as human beings. This does not mean that society should be weak or indifferent to harm. Camus supported laws, courts, and punishment, but he believed they must always operate within moral boundaries. They must never erase a person's humanity. Justice that respects limits is not timid, it is courageous. It resists the temptation to simplify the world into good and evil. It accepts complexity, tragedy, and uncertainty. For Camus, this was the deepest form of rebellion. Not the violent overthrow of enemies, but the quiet, persistent refusal to reduce human beings to objects of punishment. In that sense, justice was not a destination. It was a way of living with others in a broken world, without surrendering to cruelty.